We're going to talk about custom connectors in this video, and in particular, an approach that will allow us to deal with custom connectors as if it was an HTTP action from Power Automate. In this way, we will be able to even change the endpoint that the custom connector is making the request to, meaning that we will be able to use the same connector for different environments without changing the configuration of the custom connector. We'll also be able to surpass the 2-minute timeout limit that the HTTP action has because it's going to be a custom connector. And as a bonus, we'll see how to avoid any data endangering, any data risks from developers that use this approach in our environments. What you will see in this video is based on recent experience from a project where Chris Fernandez and I were collaborating together. Chris Fernandez and I, we have our own separate practices, but we collaborate very closely in several projects. And well, we learn from each other, but it's fair to say that I learn from him more than he does for me because he's got a plenty of experience. He's a great guy. Now, so what we're going to see is how we resolve an issue in this project where we had to integrate with an API where the constraint, the requirements were only getting data so that we could integrate it into our system based on top of that Dataverse. But the thing is that this API had this 2-minute timeout constantly breached. So it's not very well built. And when you make a request to the API, what you encounter is that sometimes, more often than not, it takes more than 2 minutes to respond. We were using the HTTP request in the beginning because there are plenty of endpoints that we have to integrate to, and creating a custom connector was not an option because of time constraints. And what we did is just use the HTTP connector, but then we encounter this 2-minute timeout limit. So we then had to go back to the custom connector approach, but we did a tweak so that we didn't have to create an endpoint in the custom connector for each of the API endpoints that we had to integrate to. So let's see how this looks like. So in Power Automate, normally you would use the HTTP connector to connect to an endpoint, right? And make a GET request, put the headers here with the authentication, etc., etc. And the good thing is that if you do that, you can put the endpoint or the headers and body, take information from an environment variable or configuration stored in a table. But if you use a custom connector, you really cannot do much with that. But if you see, this is our custom connector, a version I created for this video. In the parameters, I do give the path as a parameter in the body, and I do put the query string and the bird token, the authentication header, here as well as a parameter. This is great because then we are not depending on the custom connector configuration. We can depend on the environment configuration. And how do you do that? Well, using the code part in the custom connector. So you see here in the custom connector, just for getting to the absurd, even see which host this is google.com. But we're not making requests to google.com. What we're doing is making a request to this endpoint, which is actually an HTTP trigger from Power Automate in this example. In security, we are putting no security, but if you follow this approach that I will show you, you can put client secret authentication, no sweat. And in the definition, we only have this agnostic HTTP method, which is a post, because this way we can add a body to pass the parameters to the custom connector, and then use the code here to do whatever we want. Now, of course, there are limits to what you can do in this piece of code. And if you go to the documentation, you'll see that there are limits. Yes, you cannot do anything that takes more than 2 minutes, and the script cannot exceed more than 1 MB. These 2 minutes timer, this 2 minutes limit here has just changed because when we developed this, and if you look at in the internet, you will see that people talk about 5 seconds of execution time, but 5 seconds is plenty of time for a C# code to be executed. Let's take a look at this code. So what we are doing is we are passing from the body the bird token, the path, and the query string, these parameters that you can see in Power Automate in here, path, bird token, query string, this stuff we are passing as parameters to the custom connector. And then the C# code, what it's going to do is it's going to take this path and say, whatever path is configured in the custom connector definition, we are going to override it with this path from the configuration. And same with query string, as same for the token. Well, actually, we don't have any authentication in the connector, as you can see here. In security, we don't have any authentication. Authentication is no authentication. But in the code, we are saying put, where is this part actually? Here. Well, this is commented out for the purpose of the tests in this tenant. But in the, you see how we add the header authorization bear plus the bear token that we are passing as a parameter. So we are adding this header, and we can do whatever we want here, really. So this is what we do. We build the new URI so that we surpass the original configuration with the new configuration that we are passing from the parameters. This means that we can create this general purpose custom connector. And in our case, well, we want it this way, but you can put your own constraints in the code and make your users use the custom connector with whatever intention you have in mind as an admin. And in our case, we can surpass the 2 limit here. The action timeout can surpass the 2 limit timeout that the HTTP request has. Because if here in the settings for the HTTP, no matter what you put here, it's always going to be 2 min max. You can test it out yourself. But if you use a custom connector to a real endpoint, here you can put a longer timeout, and it's going to be there, keep listening until they got that response. And that's the key of this approach. Now, what's the problem here? Well, I know what I'm doing, but can you say the same for the developers that you have in your environments if you are part of the governance team? Well, what can we do to protect that people don't use this approach with the code here to send data to untrusted endpoints, or just data theft, putting the data in danger in general ways? So what we have to do then is add this constraint as a DLP policy. So we go to the admin center, and what we have to do is add certain constraints in the data loss prevention policies that we have here. We go to security, data and privacy, data policy, and here, if you click learn more, you can see how data loss prevention policies works. Data policies in the Power Platform. Okay, there's plenty of stuff here. What we can do, generally, what we can do with DLP policies is say, okay, which connectors can be used together and which ones are blocked. You see here, blocked connectors, whatever connectors we put in this bucket will be blocked. And then here, the connectors that you put here can be used with the connector 12. I got plenty of videos about that in the channel. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. And for custom connectors, what we can do is create a connector pattern here. And this is kind of a firewall rule you may be familiar with. And take a look here. We say, okay, all, for example, let's say that http/google.com slash wildcard, like this. So all connections to google.com slash whatever will be blocked. If we do that, then this rule appears here as a firewall rule. And then what we can do is or what we could do is all connections, like this. All connections are blocked. Okay, already exist. Then what we should do is, sorry for that, edit and say blocked. So everything is blocked except our connector, whatever it was, example.com wildcard. So everything that goes to HTTPS example wildcard is going to be not blocked but allowed, okay, in the business. Else, next rule, so if you don't comply to this rule, else is going to be blocked. And this way, we ensure that people can only use the endpoints that we want and not whatever else that can put the data of this environment at risk. Well, and that's that. Thank you for watching till the end. If you have any comments, ping in the video. And please subscribe to my newsletter to get more information. And you can contact me directly if you respond to any emails that I send you from my newsletter. And with that, see you in the next one. Bye.